Можемо розпочинати.
We can start. Good afternoon, dear friends. Thank you for being with us today at our event. I am Lyubov Tsybulskaya. I will moderate today's discussion. I represent Ukraine Crisis Media Center, the group of analysis of hybrid warfare. And I would like to give the floor to Gennady Maksak, chairman of the Council, Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism. Dear friends, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to see you all here. And now we have the period of holidays, and it is pleasant to have this attention to foreign policy. What we are going to speak about, one of the norms of constitution envisages that the parliament is responsible not only for domestic policy but also for foreign policy, and each party that fights for the place in parliament, they have their agenda and they express their views. And for us it is important to see what they propose, what opportunities we have in order to understand what to expect from the coalition agreement. Do we have some basis for foreign policy of Ukraine, and do these directions coincide, and is there understanding what will be the coalition and whether they will be efficient? We will have our own algorithm, how it should look. We present our online resource, how to do it, and then we will speak with our experts about what we saw in the programs, in the agendas, and we want to consider foreign policy issues. We provided 10 topics, and we had expert surveys on Facebook. We have a group, the Foreign Policy of Ukraine. Please join if you are not a member. And we have interesting discussions there. We surveyed our experts about 10 priorities in foreign policy, and we established the ratings for the parties. And also there is an issue of communication with parties in electoral period. It is difficult to communicate with them now. We analyzed their agendas and we looked at the proposals, public declarations, and also broadened views on foreign policy. So we had an interesting picture, and we are going to speak about it. Thank you for being with us today once again, and we have our experts who know what foreign policy is and how the parliament is engaged in this. So we give the floor to Olga Chizhova, and she will present our product, and this is an interactive product. Please, Olga. We invite you to Foreign Policy Portal. I see many faces here today, and we invite you all to address our site. And governmental bodies also address us for the information, and we provide the instrument to compare the parties concerning 10 priorities that are very important for Ukraine. And this is not only EU and NATO. We believe that foreign policy of Ukraine should not be limited to these important areas. We invite you to compare the positions of parties, to read analysis. We considered also expert position, what should these parties propose and in what directions Ukraine should work more. So you may compare the analysis, and the ratings showed that there are top of the ratings. Not all the parties will enter the parliament, but it is important to show this information because we believe that with the use of these instruments we will show the parties that the agenda should be created properly, whether the parliament enters the parliament or not. So this is our contribution to their work. fpp.com.ua, there is a big banner on the first page that will refer you to this parties and information about them, so you may compare. Parties provided information concerning some topics, and some positions are not filled, but you may find information. And please add your expert recommendations, and we will be able to give your proposal to people's deputies who will be in the Verkhovna Rada of the 9th Convocation. So the portal of foreign policy, you may enter it, you may enter the site, and you may see this information about parties' positions online. I would like to introduce today's speakers. Sergiy, Gerasimchuk, Foreign Policy Council, Ukrainian Prism, Anna Shelest, UA, Ukraine Analytica, Mikhailo, Pashkov, Public Council under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and Yuri Panchenko, Europейska Pravda news outlet. Greetings to everyone. And in a week we will have a new epoch in Ukrainian policy, and now we see new signs of Ukrainian political culture, if we may call it so. Tell me, please. Several days ago we held information marathons, and we invited representatives of top 5 leaders of electoral campaign, and we asked them about different areas of the development of Ukraine, and we noticed that the majority, they are really cautious, they are for everything good and against everything bad. But could you please tell us about agenda concerning foreign policy, and where you feel that team of professionals is involved, or those who just provided not well enough for this?
Good afternoon. First of all, general conclusion. The majority of parties do not devote enough attention to the foreign policy. The better foreign policy program is described in the European solidarity. Also, Might and Honor has a good foreign policy bloc, and Svoboda, Freedom Party, also has designed its foreign policy bloc well. We took 10 topics for analysis, as follows: European integration and NATO. These were 2 top topics, and all parties in their programs devoted some attention to that. All the rest topics, foreign policy topics, could be seen not in the foreign sections of party programs. So the next were about the United States, our policies to our neighbors. Then we analyzed the topic of promotion of Ukraine's image abroad, economic diplomacy, consolidation of international support against Russian aggression, and majority of parties answered to this question from the domestic point of view. The issue about double citizenship and relations with diaspora, and foreign policy of Ukraine beyond the US and NATO. That is, shall we look for new markets in Africa, Latin America, how to build up our relations with China. So those were issues where Verkhovna Rada can apply its foreign diplomacy. Also the issues about Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, NATO, OSCE, etc., whether they see them as proactive instruments. Now I will go one by one. Opposition bloc, Ukrainian strategy by Grossman, громадянська позиція, Батьківщина. Out of 22 parties which are campaigning, are running for election, we have taken 12 parties, and on Sunday we will see the results. So I won't describe each party for each position of each party for each topic, but as to NATO, the opposition bloc and opposition platform stand for neutral country, for counteraction to NATO, and big integration with the Russian Federation, and they believe that any Euro-Atlantic aspirations of Ukraine, this is negative. The opposition bloc stands for possibility of referendum, but opposition platform did not mention about NATO referendum. All the rest, 10 parties, they stand for NATO and NATO aspirations. But what is distinct between them? The European solidarity wants to get action plan by 2023. The Voice mentions about NATO standards, but about standards for military medical workers, military medicine. Also, might and honor mentioned NATO in the context of the Azov and the Black Sea regions. That is with the emphasis on latest challenges to Ukraine. As to the position, as to the United States, almost all the parties had ignored the issue at the level of party programs. But we analyzed not just the party programs, we analyzed also the public speeches and the previous period for some parties. In the in the freedom and the motherland parties, references to the United States appeared in the context of Normandy format and in the context with the Great Britain, with the United Kingdom. That is, they point out to the security element. Some other parties also mentioned the United States in the context of counteraction to Russian aggression. Oleg Lyashko clearly says that we should gain the status of main ally of the United States beyond the NATO. While Groisman mentioned energy security. And in this context brings in the United States. If you take the opposition bloc and opposition platform, they show negative attitude towards the United States. Here we see phrases that Ukraine is a puppet and in the hands of the United States. Actually, there is nothing new in this position. Now about economic diplomacy. We were very much surprised not to see about economic diplomacy in the programs of parties. Something was mentioned in the context of investments and necessity to attract investments, or they mentioned about changing rules inside Ukraine to simplify the entry of foreign corporations. The Radical Party, nevertheless, mentioned that Ukrainian final product should go to the international markets. And about the need to review the association agreement in terms of quotas. Opposition bloc and opposition platform here also are different. They stand for active cooperation with Russian Federation and with return to the Commonwealth, economic Commonwealth of the former Soviet states. Promotion of Ukraine in the world. This is the weakest item. It is absent among 9 out of 12 parties at all. You can find nothing about promotion of Ukraine in the world. Some separate phrases like Ukraine should be better supported in the world. It's just general statement, nothing else. Only 3 parties mentioned something about that. First of all, it was the citizens' position about cultural aspect of diplomacy, the freedom mentioned about information protection and international information channels on the Ukrainian broadcasting abroad. And also mentioned that we should involve diaspora to promotion of Ukraine. And European solidarity also mentioned that Ukraine has to coordinate effort among the parliament, the government, and civil society and promote Ukrainian interests in the world. Nothing is mentioned about Ukrainian Institute or something else. And one of the most complicated topics is counteraction to the Russian aggression, consolidation of counteraction. All parties devote much attention to this, but in the domestic aspect, first of all, in terms of preserving the territorial integrity, both opposition parties says about Ukrainian attribution of Donbass and Crimea. I would not develop much here, but actually it is about internal policy, not about foreign support. We have found extension of the negotiation format. Samopomich believes that Minsk agreements means actually capitulation, while we have to implement it. The motherland and Lashko mentioned about the need to create Budapest Plus. That is involvement of the United States and the United Kingdom. Many people many parties mentioned about possibility of negotiations with Russia, except for two opposition parties suggesting to bring the separatists. But the parties did not mention about parliamentary diplomacy and its role in it. Actually, nothing new except Budapest Plus, and no vision of additional mechanisms. Distinctions about peacekeeping operations and the need to involve peacekeeping forces is only the European solidarity, while the freedom mentioned about tribunals against Russian Federation, investigation of crimes, and a termination of our agreements with Russia. This is not about support, but about attitude towards Russia as an aggressor. With this, I would like to stop. We had produced 80 recommendations, but we won't present them all, but only 10. Anna, thank you for introduction. I would like to focus at half of the topics, half of the 10 topics. The topic of the European Union. All political forces mention the European Union in this or that context. They need to be members of the European Union, and these are two parties which state this. There's a European strategy and European solidarity, Ukrainian strategy and European solidarity. They stand for the membership in the EU. European solidarity mentions 2023, while Grossman means 2026. About membership and implementation of the association agreement, it is mentioned in the motherland, and a servant of people. Then the voice, Radical Party and the citizens' position have slightly different vision, while Lyashko believe that we should have our own vision. And might and honor mentioned about the need for membership through referendum. The Freedom Party had offered new formulation about European Ukraine centrism as a platform for Ukraine. As to our relations with neighbors, we have problems with neighbors. And many political forces mentioned about neighbors. When we look at the motherland, all political forces mentioned about Poland, Hungary, and Romania. The motherland mentioned about Poland and Belarus in the context of their economic successes that we should take as example. The Voice Party mentioned Poland and Baltic countries in the context that they are our natural allies and we should cooperate with them more closely. The civic position mentioned about Romania, Poland, and Hungary. Yes, European solidarity criticized Poland, although they mentioned about interparliamentary assembly between Ukraine, Poland, and Lithuania, while Andriy Parubi mentioned that Visegrad 4 may contribute to the formation of the Baltic Black Sea bridge. Of course, both opposition parties have very distinct position. Analyzing the speeches, we can recollect Mr. Medvedchuk, who suggested cooperation with Belarus and Moldova. Opobloc is not that frank, but they criticized Romania, Hungary, and Poland. Lyashko criticized Poland and Hungary, Romania, and Poland, and unexpectedly they suggest to have more friendly relations with Belarus. Samopomich criticizes Poland but believes that we should cooperate. Freedom pointed out to the need to strengthen relations and again mentioned Baltic, the Black Sea bridge. The People's Servant has not shown its position, but the president mentioned about the need to revive our relations with Poland, and Groisman party probably because of his former position, suggested stronger relations with Poland, Moldova, Slovakia, and criticized Hungary and Ukrainian-Hungarian relations. Cooperation beyond the European Union, NATO. Voice had shown no position. The motherland kept this in mind. They mentioned Budapest Plus, where Yulia Tymoshenko wants to bring China, and cooperation with China, India, and Japan. Civil position pointed out to the need to strengthen cooperation with China. Opposition parties support cooperation with Russia. Lashko party stands for close cooperation with the prior Israeli Samopomych and the People's Servant mentioned no political forces with whom to cooperate beyond NATO and the EU. Groisman pointed out to Africa, Kenya, specifically to Kenya. As for the parliamentary dimension, all political forces focused on the Council of Europe and Parliamentary Assembly, focused on the Russian Federation, the motherland, believes that we should strengthen our effort in OSCE, the civic platform mentioned about pro-Ukrainian lobby in the European Parliament, and pointed out that they are part of the alliance of liberal Democrats. All other parties do not produce enough information. And last but not least, the topic of foreign Ukrainians. Civic position mentioned cooperation with diaspora. Yes, also pointed out to cooperation with foreign Ukrainians. OPZZ decided to focus on protection of rights of Ukrainians working in Russia. Opposition bloc also stands for the labor migrants. Radical party creatively mentioned double citizenship. He supports possibility of double citizenship for Ukrainian labor migrants and allows double citizenship on pre-border territories with Hungary and Romania. Samopomych about double citizenship. They allow it for Romania. Freedom suggests to prohibit it. Might and Honor discusses double citizenship with special conditions. People's Servant wants cooperation with diaspora. Groisman mentioned nothing on that topic. What is even more important? This is notorious case of Markiv in Italy. This was mentioned by two political forces, by Motherland and Voice. And I'm happy that here we have some organizations which institutionally support liberation of Markiv. We believe that this issue will be brought to the attention of Ukrainian bodies. We believe that this case should be one of the priorities of political forces. And it should become a subject of negotiations in course of the coalition agreement drafting. Now I give the floor for recommendations.
So let's speak about recommendations. I'm really grateful to you. A lot of information was provided, and I invite you to our site. And now I'd like to give the floor to Mikhailo. First, what is your forecast? How foreign policy of Ukraine will be developed? And about the risks of losing subjectivity, because we have the return of Russia to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and a lot of talks that they want to squeeze out Ukraine from discussion about the conflict in Donbass, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Thank you. Answering your question, I would like to start with the fact that the situation in the Parliamentary Assembly threatens Ukraine in three areas. First, this is the continuation of degradation of international institutions. And this is about Security Council and OSCE and other institutions, and the restoration of relations with Russia in format business as usual, and disintegration of sanctions front. And the third aspect is negative influence on the positions, on the level of support of Euro-integration by society. I would like to focus on another aspect and speak about the future coalition in the parliament, and it would be interesting to compare the positions of political parties, those who may get united, for example, Servant of the People, Voice, and the Fatherland Party. Let's consider this. What they have in common and what differs them. And Batkivshina or Fatherland Party, their foreign policy, especially concerning Russia, this is about Budapest Plus format as one of the instruments to regulate the situation. If we compare their position concerning Russian direction, concerning Donbass and Crimea, here we should note that to some extent we may feel the deficit of strategic view. And this is explained by many factors. One of the factors is that during long period, Ukrainian foreign policy was in a manual mode. There was big deficit of concepts of approaches. I mentioned that the different events concerning foreign policy. Once again, I would like to stress that I believe if we analyze now the positions of political parties here, it would be necessary to say several words about the future model of the foreign policy that would be implemented by the Verkhovna Rada. First, this is about basic document that it should at least review and record principally new realia of foreign policy. The basis of foreign policy is the obsolete document. And another really important issue, we need to develop concept approaches to all Ukrainian document concerning overall foreign policy of Ukraine. And here we have Mr. Veselovsky, who heads the group that works on foreign policy of Ukraine in the framework of the Diplomatic Academy. And I believe that this area is really important and really pressing for Ukraine. So how to unite all these positions in a single document? That would first, it should correspond with the coalition agreement that is timely now, and at the same time it should clearly identify the basis of the foreign policy at four areas, Euro-Atlantic integration, opposition to Russian aggression, and also relations with the US. So this would be a first step. And the second option, if we are speaking about a model of foreign policy and new quality of this policy here, we need to think about modernization of the system of provision of foreign policies. This is a separate area. Please open new provision on the Office of the President of Ukraine, Office of the President, and take an old document and you will see it. The third aspect, this is necessary and really pressing, to update the instruments of the foreign policy, I mean our diplomatic service. The reform of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, significant reform, not only organizational, but also personnel and functional reform. This is also an important area. I understand that maybe this is not the topic of political agenda but of the party, but I believe that this is really important, and that this is one of the directions in which we should think and act. This is the priority steps. Also, if we are speaking about Russia, so we should have a proper state concept for midterm prospect. We should have clear rules of the game in this area of relations with Russia, in economy, in energy sector, in foreign policy, in information and other sectors. Because we had and we still have problems that are not resolved, and this is about economic relations and different other spheres. Here I believe that, of course, this is important area, the element of the assessment of the positions of political parties. So to see all this rows of models of positions of political forces, and this is the basis for development of the approach to the coalition agreement, and this issue is really timely. Yuri, the question to you, Eurointegration as a political course or as a correspondence with the norms, standards, and production So did you see this deep Euro integration considered by political parties? Thank you. The matter is we had different approach towards this issue. We had an idea to do something like Prism did to analyze the agenda, but the parties usually speak about good things, but there are many situations, many aspects, because devil is always in the details, and this may delay Euro integration, but parties do not want to mention these issues on their agendas. And this Rada, if we take declarations formally, so the constitutional majority should be for Euro integration, but at the same time we see the situation that at this time we are lagging behind 2 times on the association agreement, and the weak point here is the parliament, because it does not adopt proper Euro integration laws. And our question is whether new deputies are ready to vote for the initiatives that can be unpopular, and how they see the resolution of the problems that accumulated. So we decided not to search for this on the agendas, but to survey the parties, and we have 8-page questionnaire. We send it to 6 parties who have the biggest chances to be in the Verkhovna Rada, and the Force and Dignity party included. So those parties with the biggest chances to enter new Verkhovna Rada. Maybe some of them won't pass. Only opposition platform for life didn't answer, but we understand their position. And it was weird to ask about their views, how to speed up European integration. This was some sort of mocking, maybe. So we published these materials. We published 3 articles, and also we had a test to verify knowledge of party programs. And the main impression that we had is that future Verkhovna Rada should be ready for implementation of reforms. This is not about the end goal. Of course, this is full membership, and this is great. But we set some traps in our questionnaires. We asked about some issues concerning which it is not comfortable to say otherwise, because this is unpopular. For example, in the framework of trade with EU, do you support the limits concerning import if it would help domestic production? It is weird, but the majority of parties said that this is impossible because it contradicts the association agreement. You may compare it with the current Verkhovna Rada. The only party was... No, we didn't have Lishko. The Force and Dignity we had. They said that there should be a separate program, and only those fields that would be identified by the programs, some preferences can be made for them. But the biggest indicator was moratorium on timber export. This is one of the deepest crisis issue with the EU. And for the first time in relations with countries with whom they have FTA and double arbitrage, there is an issue concerning this moratorium. So this year, the decision may be taken, and the Verkhovna Rada will have big dilemmas. Something should be done with it, and the arbitrage will be allegedly in our favor, and we should find new instrument how to protect Ukrainian forests and forest processing, timber processing. Current cabinet of ministers developed many draft laws that were coordinated with EU, and they tried to resolve this issue, but they were afraid to submit it to this Verkhovna Rada because this issue was too politicized. The deputies were not ready even to discuss this moratorium, not just ban of the moratorium, but even correction of this moratorium. And we were really surprised that out of 5 parties, 4 responded that they are ready to replace this moratorium. So the only party that is categorically against and want to preserve moratorium is the Fatherland Party or Batkivshina Party. Some parties provided vague answers what they can get instead. For example, the 7th of People said that they wanted to introduction of rules of cutting like in Switzerland or Austria. We asked experts about the rules in those countries, but the experts said that there were no special rules that would differ from other countries of EU. And the European Solidarity, they propose to search compromises with EU. This is good, but this is rather vague. And the concrete response was provided by Voice Party, chipping of all the timber. This is an efficient way, and many people believe that this is an optimal way. And Force and Dignity surprised us. They want to introduce full ecological ban on cutting timber, and this resolves the issue of ecology and but then we will get ecological problems because we would have to import timber, but also this way is also possible. What is important that these are not the only issues concerning which the parties provided answers that look progressive than those that we see in this Verkhovna Rada, and we have some optimism about it. And if we are speaking about other issues, not economic issues, all the parties without exception are ready to ratify the Istanbul Convention against violence in the families, against domestic violence.
The fact the parties had said something, it does not mean that they will implement it. Quite recently, Mr. Razumkov had said he mentioned that in the parliament they want to unite together the Foreign Policy Committee and the Eurointegration Committee, which is nonsense, actually. But we have the list of the parties' promises, and when they will come to the parliament and start to work, we'll be able to show to them that list. I believe that the issue about timber export is related to the fact that all the shadow deals with timber are not sufficiently covered by mass media. Many parties who are members of this parliament, they promised the pro-European course while they did not implement this in the parliament. And now we start with the political party representatives, Elena Sotnik, Mind and Honor Party. I have thank you for your analysis, but I do not understand the format of some conclusions. As deputy head of subcommittee about harmonization of Ukrainian legislation, it was strange to hear that the European integration issues, diaspora item, participation about trade promotion of Ukraine cultural charge d'affaires. I'm a bit surprised that this is not reflected in your comments. Probably this means that we have not communicated our position sufficiently loudly. The majority of comments we received from Европейская Pravda newspaper, who produced a very good questionnaire. There is a big problem, as you mentioned correctly. Many parties which stated the European choice and European aspirations as their major objective, they actually do not stand for it. European integration is about change of rules of the game and standards here in Ukraine. Unfortunately, some MPs blocked the European integration draft laws. It looks like all that are technical nuances, but these appear to be key challenges for the future. During Ukraine EU summit, the president mentioned that he wants to implement the association agreement in a very short period, within not 5-7 years, but within several years. But without mechanism, it would not be possible. At least we should pass something similar to Poland. Now about strategic directions. On Monday, I had published my strategic article in Novое Время magazine about foreign policy of Ukraine, where I mentioned the United States, the United Kingdom, our relations with Eastern Europe. And I devoted much attention to defense strategy and economic strategy. Appearance of big European and North American countries, especially in innovations in the energy sector, in agriculture, will actually mean that defense and security strengthening for Ukraine. Russia would not attack a country where we have big American companies. I wrote much about strategies, and Mr. Smishko many times mentioned about Baltic Black Sea Economic Union. I hope to continue this work in the next parliament. I believe that Ukraine should have a strategy how to build up union with its neighbors. And as to the Markiv state, this is actually beginning of the new format of relations with those countries who supported us. Currently, we are producing a good, I think, plan. I think it will give new momentum to our cooperation in Europe. And about diplomatic corps, we should totally review our attitude towards provision of the diplomatic corps abroad, and as to the economic diplomacy, as to the image of Ukraine. The key problem of Ukraine within that 5 years was that we have not used this period to send a message that, yes, we have a war, but we have very positive things in Ukraine. We failed to do this. And now Ukraine had dropped out from the agenda of our European and geopolitical partners. So you will now, having analyzed all the programs, you will serve as a watchdog in the new parliament. Anna has a comment, as far as I understand. We are very much limited this time. I think that we cannot review all the parties. With some parties, we had problems. Keeping in mind that some MPs that many MPs had moved to other parties, we cannot analyze your position. Your 5 months position as a position of your political force now. So we looked at the new political forces, analyzed them within 3 months. And this had proved that foreign policy was not unfortunately. Some political forces did not answer us. Only the civil platform provided us with answer. And this now I would like to give the floor to Lesa Vasilenko from Voice Party to comment. Good afternoon. Thank you, experts, for your analysis. There is much what to think over. There is much to discuss the program that was presented by Golos party. More explicit explanations about our program. They are in different program documents. For us, the priority for the next year is counteraction to Russian aggression. For us, it will be priority number one in all the spheres. That's why we will apply maximum effort to implement all our program statements. As to the integration processes about NATO, we distinguish between primary steps to be done by Ukraine and longer-term measures to prevent further Russian aggression. And of course, we should not limit the foreign policy of our country to only to that. Ukraine has to become one of the leaders of Eastern Europe and the leader in post-communist space. Besides that, we made emphasis in our policy on the need to diversify international relations. We should not limit our economic relations, cultural relations, political relations with a short list of countries. We should cooperate with the international community in broad sense. At the same time, we should strengthen our friendship with our traditional partner, the United States, Canada, European countries. Here we mean Germany and the UK. In order to do this, we have to strengthen our diplomacy and our diplomatic corps. As for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for many years, dozens of years, the budgets which are allocated for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they remain insufficient. And thus, resources of our diplomats are not sufficient for efficient foreign policy. That's why we have to allocate sufficient budget and establish relations, close relations between the diplomatic corps in recent future. We will publish policy of the Voice Party as to our foreign relations, and you will read it. Thank you for your report, and I hope for cooperation, for future cooperation. We will use your expert opinion. Now I would like to give the floor to Galina Mogylyuk from People's Servant.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this detailed, interesting analysis. I would like to note that it is impossible to introduce all in the agenda. We work in all the areas. And now we are in electoral process, and also our party created 21 subcommittees, including foreign policy and diplomacy. We are working on some draft laws that will be introduced and registered in the first days of the work of the Verkhovna Rada. One of the priorities in foreign policy and diplomacy is relaunch and update of the reform of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we thank Gerasimchuk Center that they raised this issue. We believe that this is one of the main important topics, because today the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is close and non-transparent in communication with citizens. And we believe that this dualism that exists now and the situation that exists between the office of the president and the ministries of foreign affairs concerning the situation, our work in order to prevent dualism in relations, we plan to carry out the reform of Ministry of Foreign Policy, and we believe that we should create a separate independent body that will deal with that will provide access to citizens to diplomacy, that interested parties be involved, and the embassy in Japan and China as of today, no representatives, no Japanese or Chinese, and we have trained specialists who speak different languages, including Hindi. We would like to invite experts who specialize in different fields in order to reinforce Ukrainian presence abroad. And the budget is allocated for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we do not know whether this budget is spent rationally. And in all European structures, there are budget lines for some areas of work, and when we will have the next budget, we would like that some areas of foreign policy should be allocated with some amounts of money. And also our priority is to simplify provision of financial help. There are some problematic issues concerning international donors of Ukraine, and these issues are connected with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are some delays in the ministry concerning international help of donors, also ratification of Istanbul and Rome Statute also on the agenda, and also changes should be introduced in Article 9 of Constitution concerning international agreements. Now we are working actively on this in order that from the start of work of the Verkhovna Rada to improve foreign policy of Ukraine on a daily basis. We invited all 12 parties, and only 3 representatives came. We are grateful to you. Unfortunately, 2 representatives left. Unfortunately, they won't be able to hear our recommendations. Oh, so we have another representative of the party, Alinik, representative of Svoboda, All Ukrainian Union. First, I would like to thank for the work that was done. This was deep work based on programs and recommendations that we've submitted until 1st of July. I would like to provide several comments, because you've mentioned the parties that support Vitaly Markiv, you've mentioned Golos and Batyivshchina, and Svoboda also. We had declarations from Gennady to support Markiv, and also National Corps and the Right Sector and Svoboda joined to the pickets near Italian embassy, and we support support the intensification of participation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other bodies of state power, Ukrainian diaspora, in order that Ukrainian veterans, people who did a lot for Ukrainian state, they should not be persecuted abroad. And on our agenda, a lot is said and about tribunal and Russia, because Russia may do tribunal against our citizens like they do it in Italy. This is an example of this. And the situation in the Council of Europe, in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, we cannot be sure that tomorrow EU will support sanctions. We cannot be sure about this. So that's why, like other parties, we cannot speak about concrete dates of joining. We see that there is split in Europe. There is Southern and Western Europe, and we believe that we should better cooperate with those who have the same interests with Poland, Romania, and Baltic and Black Sea Union, and we thank for recommendations on cooperation with Japan and Saudi Arabia and Brazil. They are interested in opposing Russian bloc in the world, and Ukraine is a big country. We have about 50 million population. Unfortunately, in the territory, 40 million. And we need to have projects for our region, for our continent. Only then we will be interesting to other states. Unfortunately, we do not have much time. So quickly, we have 80 recommendations concerning each area. If we unite some of them, and some of them are really specific, all experts note that foreign policy bloc should be a separate unit in the coalition agreement. There should be priorities in foreign policy for the future parliament. Second important recommendation concerning speed up of formation of Ukrainian delegations to different organizations, of course to OSCE and Council of Europe, and groups of friendship. We understand that as of today, Parliament does not use enough of the mechanisms of the parliamentary diplomacy, and if we are speaking about image and consolidation of support of Ukraine, not only in opposition to Russia, but also in reforms inside Ukraine, this is not only the task of embassies and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. A lot depends on cooperation, on bilateral cooperation between the parliaments, because many countries are parliamentary democracies. That's why a lot depends on the parliaments and the opposition in relation to Ukraine. Of course, we are saying that if we are speaking about EU, first of all, we should focus on the new roadmap to provide proper legislation. We see that based on results of monitoring, we are lagging behind. We should adopt more legislation concerning FTA, and as of today, we need a roadmap with priorities and dates, and it should be also provided in the coalition agreement and in the laws. And taking into account changes that were introduced recently in the new parliament, we should create separate committee concerning Euro-Atlantic integration, because as of today we have two subcommittees concerning Euro-Atlantic integration, and in foreign policy and European integration, and three committees in the national security deals with this issue as well. So you understand that we should focus this in these priorities. We should have separate committee that would focus properly on Euro-Atlantic integration and the reforms that are included there. And also experts say that we should establish better dialogue with Washington, taking into account that the new parliament should establish cooperation with committees of Senate and Congress of the USA, because military assistance depend on them, as well as sanctions against Russian Federation. And the next is the necessity to improve voting for Ukrainian resolutions in the framework of international organizations, including UNO. And here the experts note that we should make more active cooperation with Africa and Latin America to show that what is going on now in Ukraine, this is not just Ukrainian problem. This is undermining of international law and international organizations. So these are not domestic matters. Here we clearly understand that in many countries of the world, Ukraine does not have ambassadors in many countries of the world. And in the course of voting, we see it clearly. And in UNO, December we see it, and this may be a powerful channel of communication. The same about economic cooperation and promotion of interests of Ukraine. Next, experts propose to hold parliamentary or committee hearings depending on the level of issues. Here is the important element. Why they insist on this? Because experts believe that parliamentary and committee hearings, this is an important mechanism to communicate between experts and Verkhovna Rada, to discuss the problems and to elaborate recommendations. If we cannot form the strategy or the concept of foreign policy as the state document, and it needs time, and you remembered about the project of the Diplomatic Academy, but about separate issues. These parliamentary hearings can become a platform where these recommendations are elaborated, and this can be a guideline for all the institutions.
And my last comment. Many experts believe that Ukraine needs to develop the neighborhood policy, and the parliament could become a driver of its formation. And this neighborhood policy could be described in the coalition agreement, and also the parliamentary committee would deal with that. Thank you, dear experts. It was a huge work. I believe that political parties will pay attention at your work. Unfortunately, not so much attention was devoted to information war and information policy. I hope that next week we will organize a discussion what to do next, what to do with the information policy, how to develop information strategy. And I hope that the newly elected parliament and president will hear us, and that we will draft the information policy of Ukraine together. Thank you for mentioning promotion of Ukraine abroad. This is also an important topic. Thank you for coming. Okay, now let's shift to our Q&A session. I am Violeta Moskalo from Global Ukraine. I would like to thank the Prism organization for this event. One of the areas which you analyzed was relations with foreign Ukrainians with the diaspora. And Vitaly Markiv case had shown the need for that. There is a strong discrimination of the rights of Ukrainian labor migrants, that is, Ukrainian citizens who have Ukrainian passport, who do not enjoy their constitutional rights. I have very short question. Whether you observed any violation of the rights of Ukrainian citizens who are labor migrants? Maybe you should include this into your recommendations, to have parliamentary hearings about discrimination of the rights of Ukrainian citizens abroad as to ensure equal rights and freedom. The issue of labor migrants was mentioned in the programs of some political forces. Your organization raised that issue. I believe that your recommendation is fair. We will bring it to the attention of our policymakers. But I'm afraid that this topic might be exploited now during election campaign and could be forgotten later. I'm Vasil Babach. I'm from the animation package of reform. Thank you to the analysts of Ukrainian Prism for the analysis. And now my question is about European and Euro-Atlantic unity. To all the experts, whether you observed any ideas among party programs how to preserve the Euro-Atlantic unity in the issue of sanctions. Because we clearly observed that that unity is now almost undermined when Russian delegation, after 5 years of counteraction, Russian delegation was brought back to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Whether you had seen something in the political parties as to this end. And whether you have any recommendations as to that. And my small comment about neighborhood policy. Whether you may describe any more specific suggestions as for the neighborhood policy about Poland and Hungary, where we have the issue of national memory, national minorities, and language. 80% of parties speak about Minsk and Normandy format, about how they could be changed. That is, they focus on the negotiations format. Madalet described the use of international organizations, strengthening work in the Council of Europe and the OSCE, and strengthening their work in the European People's Party. As for the need for pressure, This is mentioned by European Solidarity. They want to preserve the international coalition to make pressure upon Russian Federation, while some separate parties continue to state that Ukraine should be independent and rely on itself. And then each party suggests different ways how to strengthen itself. What is interesting, all the parties describe the need for international support, but no party specifically speak about pressure, about sanctions, etc. And they do not mention the need to increase sanctions. Might and Honor made a stronger emphasis on the Black Sea and Azov region. Because this political party has a lot of military experts. More specifying question, pressure upon Russian Federation related to sanctions. Whether there are any specificities about that future pressure. I would like to end a key moment. In respect of preserving international solidarity, this is task number one, priority number one for Ukrainian diplomats. But the best foreign policy is a wise governance inside the country. Efficient reforms inside the country will strengthen our international position. At the moment they would see that we have irrevocable changes inside the country, then they will change their attitude towards Ukraine. Then I believe that counteraction to Russian aggression is the European integration. The best means to counteract to your enemy is to be different from him. You mentioned about disputes with Poland and Hungary. We did not go in much detail as to the measures as to Poland, but we asked questions about possibility to amend the law on education and the law on languages. Almost all party leaders mentioned that Ukraine should not change its position. Of course, we will fulfill recommendations of the Venice Commission, but besides that, we would not do more. Only Motherland is ready to initiate the negotiations process with Budapest with the mediation of the European Commission. Each topic which we analyzed, where we analyzed the position of the parties, you may find our own vision and position as experts, where we provided our recommendations. And our recommendations what to do in respect of those. I would like to thank to the authors of this, Natalia Belets, Democracy Institute named after Orlik. My question to the analysts. Don't you think that the issue of Crimea should be introduced to the number of issues with foreign policy? Policy reflected by the parties. I would suggest to do this in the future. Because there are a huge number of issues related to Crimea which should be resolved in course of international policy. And as far as I understood from your presentation, neither party mentioned Turkey as a strong regional player. I understand that for Ukrainian diplomacy at the moment, it is a very complicated and tough issue. But for the sake of regional stability, for promotion of the Crimean problem, Turkey is very important. So, thinking about future questionnaires for parliamentary parties, please include their vision of Ukrainian-Turkish relations, how to build them up, how to develop them, and how to prevent negative consequences with the European Union. Thank you very much. I agree with you. I will answer very quickly. Crimea. We formulated our questions keeping Crimea in mind about consolidation of support. But it was only the Voice Party which devoted attention to Crimean aspects. Also, Maitin Una made emphasis on the Azov direction. Actually, this, I think, covers Crimea. All the rest simply mentioned about Crimea and Donbass together. As for Turkey, speaking about neighboring countries, we suggested to cover Turkey. So parties did not mention Turkey. This is probably related that parties do not see any politics and policy beyond US and NATO. This shows that those who prepared policies, they brought in the countries which they liked. Thus is how Leshko brought in Israel. One of the parties brought Emirates. Beside that, we have not found Japan, which provides a lot of help to Ukraine. while Might and Donna mentioned Africa. That is, our analysis suggests that there is no vision, no strategic vision that Ukraine should have foreign policy beyond the EU and NATO. But this does not mean that we would not have such policies in future. That is, we need to explain to political leaders why we should pay attention at Peru, Bangladesh, and other countries. Ukraine should at least understand it, red lines or priorities. We have further question.
Viktor Khmelyovsky, the Lenders and Entrepreneurs Union and the chief editor of Employer magazine. Could you please comment, dear experts, on the agendas and priorities of the parties that want to enter the Verkhovna Rada? How do they identify the priorities in cooperation of the state and politicians with the civil society, first of all with business community, in the context of promotion of Ukraine in foreign markets, in foreign economic activity, based on which the policy of state is formed, because everything depends on economic. Why I ask this? Because as of today, even in those international agreements that were approved and ratified in Ukraine and have the right above the national legislation based on Article 9, some parties carry out discrimination policy concerning cooperation with the separate institutions of business and civil environment. Thank you. Thank you. So this issue appears in sections that are dedicated to economic development and less in the promotion of Ukraine in the world sections. Involvement of business, only European Solidarity speak about this topic. They believe that the business and civil society and the government should interact more. And what is interesting that in economic diplomacy section, Dignity and Force are the only who say that the state should help not just big companies, but small and medium-sized business in order to enter European markets. So this is the position of Voice and Dignity Party. And Servant of People says about commercial diplomacy to promote products of Ukraine to global markets. In this case, it's difficult to say whether this is about promotion or help to business and involvement of the business to this process. But these are just mentionings. And about involvement of business, I tried to find this information, but I see it only in the European Solidarity section. It is necessary to carry out comprehensive actions. These actions should be taken by the government and by diaspora and the international community. So what about the errors that should not be repeated in the new parliament. I believe that the previous parliament, it didn't pay attention or didn't pay a lot of attention to key areas of foreign policy and strategy of foreign policy. Let's take the document, open the document. The main basics of the foreign policy. So there were only two changes about EU and NATO, and that's all. It looks like we do not have Russian aggression, Crimea, Donbass. So the new parliament should pay attention to this, that this is the constitutional body, and the parliament provides foreign policy, and you as representatives of the parties who will enter the parliament, you should note it and you should start with these topics. The key problem is protectionism, the wish of deputies to somehow violate agreements with EU, to take additional profit for themselves or for their business. This became big problem in relation with EU because these actions became systematic, and this influenced the level of trust between Ukraine and the EU. I fully support my colleagues. I would like to add that there is lack of attention to foreign policy issue. The committee was one of the smallest, and there were a lot of issues for consideration, and also the Committee of Ecology did with matters that are inappropriate for it. For example, it should deal with international development. So there should be proper attitude towards foreign policy. We should have more structured approach. And there can be many negative examples. And the heads of subcommittees on Eurointegration were not the delegates to Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, and this is the attitude to the sphere of foreign policy. And we should change it in the new parliament if we want to get consolidated assistance. Ukrainian Prism also raised this issue constantly in its publications. This is lack of cooperation between the Rada, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and other ministries, and also the law on language and the content of the article of language. This was not coordinated with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and these changes were not introduced, and the Ministry of Education and Foreign Affairs responded to this initiative and didn't prepare our partners, foreign partners, for this. First, I would like to thank Lyubov as moderator, and we thank our colleagues for their presentations. So we have some tea, and we have some ice, so our discussion may be continued. So we are waiting for the 9th convocation. Now we will speak off records. Thank you for this opportunity, and please, you may refer to our site and not more information. Have a nice day.